Hi everyone, I'm Vanessa Tinker. I'm a lecturer at Collegium Civitas and I am an analyst for the Opportunity Institute for Foreign Affairs. I am currently at the 3Cs Initiative and with me I have one of our panelists. I have with me Velina Tchakarova, who I'm very excited to discuss today with some of the current situations that we're experiencing. And I'd like to ask for your perspective about them. Velina is the founder of FACE for a conscious experience that assists clients' plans for risk and trends that may arise in the uncertain geopolitical environment. Thank you, Velina, for joining us.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Great pleasure being here.
So, in your opinion, which direction is the international system currently evolving? Are you in the opinion that we're moving closer towards a bipolar world order with China and the US as the major power players? Or do you feel that we're going more towards this multipolar shape with countries such as India, Brazil, Indonesia, and South Africa also playing an important role in these regions?
Well, here is what I think about it. And this is my main thesis based on my geopolitical assessments, covering mostly the trends projections when it comes to these global system shifts and global transformational processes that have been more or less taking place over the last 10, 15 years. So my main thesis has been more or less the same since around 2015, 14, 15. We may be entering a transitional period of the international relations that entails both. What do I mean by that? On the one hand, we may see what I call bifurcation of the global system, and I will explain why this is something much bigger than just bipolarity, as we traditionally understand the polarization of the international relations. But at the same time, we may also witness a lot of multipolarity at the level of regional centers of power. Let me start with the bifurcation. So bifurcation is a term from the physics, and it practically explains a state of the system when a system is ripe to the point that it starts splitting in two. And it makes sense if we take a look at what is going on right now in the world between the United States and China. It's not just about trade, and it's not just about the economic ties. That means this unprecedented level of entanglement between these two powers is now about to witness the opposite development, the opposite trend, that is decoupling, right? But the decoupling doesn't entail just the trade and economic relations. It is also about navigating the fourth industrial revolution, who is going to be the winner, who is going to achieve the most technological breakthroughs, because what happened in the previous periods of international relations is that Great Britain and later United States became global powers with global power projections thanks to the technological revolutions. And at the very same time, we see also competition over the hearts and minds of partners and allies, over regional and international organizations, and then again, of course, over ideology. And even though that this summit's not going to be about, capitalism versus Marxism, we see already that there is a competition over narratives. So, at the top of the system, we have two systemic rivals with two very different ideas about rules, norms, standards, about partners and allies, about international and regional organizations, and about the way how they want actually to navigate in these critical socioeconomic networks, such as energy, agriculture, commodities, trade, economy, and so on and so forth. But below the top of the global system, we see a lot of fluid, ad hoc regional constellations, where all of these critical partners, and you name some of them, are navigating between these two systems of power, between these two centrifugal forces, while actually avoiding an ultimate decision to get caught in a binary world. So, we saw what happened to Australia Australia entered the Defense and Security Pact with the United States and with Great Britain, the so-called AUKUS. And immediately the consequence out of it was for China to cut the geoeconomic ties with Australia. And that kind of ultimate decision is more or less not on the agenda of most of the European powers, where, as we've seen, they were trying and still are trying to manage the business, the economic relationship with China. This is also not on the agenda of ASEAN countries, so Southeast Asia. And India, obviously, is also navigating between the two blocks. On the one hand, being part of BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. On the other hand, also being part of the quadrilateral format with the United States, with Japan, with Australia. So my point is that in the end, we may enter a bifurcated world in this transitionary period, but at the very same time, all of these regional actors will try to maximize their gains to benefit from a systemic competition while avoiding either-or decisions. In the end, there is probably one exception, and that is Russia. Because Russia, in my view, has sided with China prior to taking the decision on making a move on Ukraine in order to get a pole position in this newly emerging systemic conflict between China and the United States.
Wow. Yeah. Then to follow up with that, based on China and its involvement with the Russian-Ukrainian war, how do you see China in terms of its role in, for one, supporting Russia, on the one hand, and then trying to more or less play the role of a mediator between parties on the other? What do you think Beijing is trying to achieve by doing this?
Well, first and foremost, let's take over from what I just explained about China's positioning in the global system. I mean, being this systemic rival to the United States, having the ambition to become a global power with global power projection, while at the moment actually expanding regionally through a two-fold approach. On the one hand, concentrating on the maritime power projection in the Indo-Pacific, South China Sea, East China Sea, Strait of Taiwan. On the other hand, expanding on the large Eurasian landmass. So here we talk about these terrestrial corridors that China has been building through the Central Asian countries, through Russia, and also through, meanwhile, South Asia, including Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, and then connecting to the what is now famous as West Asia. These are the Gulf states, the Middle Eastern powers. So you understand that this is a very unique and different geopolitical approach than the one pursued by the United States as a maritime power, first and foremost, controlling the oceans and the seas, and previously also by the Great Britain. So against this background, we need to understand that China cannot be neutral in any conflict because it is a power with really big long-term ambitions. And here, what I've been actually arguing, my main thesis has been since 2013 when Xi Jinping came to power and started building up this personal relationship with the Russian president, Putin. Meanwhile, after 10 years, more than 40 personal meetings between these two leaders. We are seeing the manifestation of this modus vivendi of coordination between these two powers, which I've coined as the dragon bear back in 2015 after the first invasion of Ukraine, to point to the comprehensive coordination in various critical domains, from commodities and energy to, obviously, technological exchange, scientific exchange, defense cooperation, to space exploration and cooperation in critical international and regional organizations. So it's a comprehensive coordination, but this modus operandi doesn't have a term in our Western understanding, in our Western concepts of strategic alliances, strategic partnerships. So it's not the same because it's not based on values. It's not based on shared, normative understanding. It's based on geopolitics, on realpolitik. These two powers seek to navigate through this complexity while backing each other, first and foremost, for the sake of internal political stability, and second, for the sake of international stability and predictability in the international relations. So here, first takeaway is that it was China that saved the Russian economy and currency after the first invasion of Ukraine and helped Russia to stabilize. And second takeaway is that it was China, again, that, helped Russia avoid international isolation following the largest full-scale war against Ukraine on the old continent after the end of the Second World War. So to maybe define it differently, the Russian President Putin will have never, ever considered launching a full-scale war on Ukraine on the 24th of February last year if he had not relied on the comprehensive long-term support by China. So against this backbone, we cannot say that China is neutral. Why is China then mediating? Why is China proposing 12-point peace plan? Why is China actually trying to position itself now on the global arena also as a constructive, rational player? Well, it makes perfect sense because, yes, China has zero interest in seeing Russia losing the war and having to deal with a security vacuum in the north of its border, while actually being engaged in the largest and most severe military escalation in the Strait of Taiwan, and at the same time dealing with India along the line of actual control, where from time to time we see also direct military clashes. So China doesn't want three-front scenario, and it wants to, of course, prevent it from happening. But at the same time, if Russia loses the war, China has a plan B. And the plan B is to present itself as this rational player that has actually provided a peace plan for the war, that has tried to mediate between Russia and Ukraine, that has sent its envoy for peace. And practically at the next level, there will be also suggestion to participate in the reconstruction of Ukraine. So you see that global powers, they have, of course, only one rationale, only one calculus, and that is to benefit from each possible scenario, to prepare accordingly for each possible situation, and then to act accordingly. And we should draw the right conclusions that are that it is in the interest of China to push forward the Russian interests and to coordinate with Russia to actually have a full control over Eurasia and also the Arctic for the future, when climate change will allow Northern Sea route to be an alternative to the US-controlled Indo-Pacific maritime line. It is in China's interest that Russia keeps the Americans and the Europeans busy on the old continent, that it weakens actually the European position, because China still needs the European industrial heart for a huge trade, volume portfolio. But at the very same time, it is in China's interest that the Russians are occupying the Americans right now in Europe, while China has the time to focus on its economy, to actually intimidate its neighbors, to further expand its maritime portfolio. At the very same time, like I said, in case that this does not work out the way China wishes and looks at it, there is still plenty of opportunity for China to act differently. That means that if Russia loses the war, if Russia fails, if there is an economic crash, if there is then a dissolution of the Russian Federation, China will become part of this group of international players that will be responsible for Ukraine's reconstruction, and at the same time will be responsible for, the future of Russia. So it's a typical behavior of a geopolitical player that tries to more or less turn every scenario into a win-win situation.
Well, thank you, Velina. so much for sharing all of your insight. It's a lot to digest, but thank you very much. And I'm so happy that you were able to attend this 3Cs initiative. And I look forward to carrying on our conversation further later on.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you.